This is an oral history interview for the Lafayette Historical Society Oral History Project. The interviewer is Ryan McKinley. Today's date is January 26, 2015, and it's 11:26. And I am interviewing Miss Anne Skram at her home in Lafayette, California. Okay, so what is your full name, and could you spell it for the recording?
You want all of the names or just...
First and last is fine.
Oh,
yeah.
Anne, A-N-N. And my middle name is Thankful.
Thankful, okay.
T-H-A-N-K-F-U-L. And my current last name, well, probably final last name is Skram, S-K-R-A-M.
Okay.
Okay?
And when were you born?
July 22nd, 1933.
And what were your parents' names?
My mother was Doris Marvel Baldridge Pendleton, and my father was Broughton Pendleton. P-E-N-D-L-E-T-O-N.
Okay. How many siblings do you have?
There are 5 of us.
Okay. And you are the oldest?
Eldest,
okay.
Yeah.
Could you just give me your siblings' first names?
I'm Anne, then there's Beth, who is deceased, Jane, Margaret, and Gurdon.
Okay. When you were born, you had mentioned before we started this that you guys were living in Walnut Creek or Montclair?
Originally, I was born in Colorado, but that was because my parents were emigrating to California at the time.
Okay.
And my mother was with my grandparents in Estes Park in Colorado, so I was born there.
Okay, and then shortly after you were born, they moved to California.
We moved to California, originally Montclair, lived in Montclair, and then in Oakland. Well, Montclair is in Oakland, but in another part of Oakland on Sequoia Road, which is over by the Oak Knoll Naval Hospital. And then my father found the property in Lafayette, and we bought that and then built the house on that property, where I essentially grew up.
Okay. And do you remember where that property was?
Oh, yes. It's on Happy Valley Road, on Redwood Lane on Happy Valley Road.
Okay. What do you remember about the house?
The house or the lot or the land?
Yeah, anything you can remember about.
Oh, yeah. Happy Valley was largely agrarian at the time, and the house, Redwood Lane, crossed Happy Valley Road and into the Cassos property, and they probably know about the Cassos because Mary Ann Malley, one of whose brothers was my first major boyfriend, has talked a lot about, I'm sure, the people in Happy Valley, because the Malleys were some of the early settlers on Happy Valley Road. Our property was originally the main house, which was in front of our house. When we bought our property, was owned by a man whose name was Jerry Durham, and he owned a laundry in Oakland. And I think that was about a total of about 2.25 acres, and our property was the back acre. And it was originally, allegedly, part of the original Acalanes land grant, and we found all kinds of artifacts horseshoes and metal nail or steel or cast iron nails and pieces of pottery and things when we would, because we did have an orchard. It was an orchard. Would have it plowed every year, and every year when they plowed, we found all kinds of stuff. And at the front of Redwood Lane had a creek that ran down in front of it, so it was a perfect place for a house. When the land grants were issued. Now, some of this is hearsay. My daughter Mary can check about the land grant and would someday. But anyway, the property, the back half that my dad bought for $13,000 had been allegedly it was going to be a thoroughbred breeding barn. So it was a big U-shaped, large. I think it was probably about 3,000 square feet building. And the first time I ever saw the interior structure, it was indeed a beautiful barn with cast iron watering troughs for the horses and cast iron stalls, bars, and of course I wanted to keep it as a barn because I wanted the horse. I wanted to bring my horse with me. So my dad's best friend, a man whose name was Jad Daly, who had gone to college with my father in New London, he'd moved to California, and they sort of demolished the barn part but kept the outside of the house, which was clapboard wood, and turned it into a home. And it had a walk-in freezer that was as big as most people's bedroom, and and then Tony Fergundes dug the pool for us. Tony Fergundes, by the way, was quite a character and still is known as a character to anybody. He lived in Hunsaker Canyon, and he owned trucks and backhoes. And so I think he dug every pool in Happy Valley on those days. He was also a terrible flirt. My mother was very pretty. So he would always come when my mother was going to be home, because she continued to have an interior decorating business in Lafayette. And my father was an entrepreneur too. And we lived there, or my parents lived there until the 70s, and then they sold it because my mother lost her sight, and it was no longer practical to live in that big house. And it was finally demolished, and there is now another bigger house, a 2-story house on that piece of land. But we had a nice orchard, and it was a great place to live. It was just a great place to live, a great place to grow up. The Cassos owned the land in front of Redwood Lane, up to where the Lafayette Grammar School, or I don't know if they call it the Lafayette Grammar School, but the grammar school that is on that property was Casso property. And then the Casso farm, because they raised alternated crops of tomatoes, onions, and zucchini, and those are mostly what I think they called it a truck farm in those days. They had a big old barn, and they had a small orchard of orange trees, basically, and I'm not sure. I think they had apricot trees further down on the property. And Johnny, who was their only son, was drafted and went to Korea, and he lost a leg in Korea. So when his parents died, I think that's when he sold the property to the school or to this county, and then divided the other property. I think the barn is still there, but I don't know what else is there anymore, because I haven't been through Happy Valley in quite a while. For the simple reason that it's no longer Happy Valley. It's now a bunch of gigantic houses.
Yeah. It's a development now.
Oh, scary development. I was thinking about the people that I grew up with in Happy Valley. Almost everyone was either a doctor, a lawyer, owned a business, and nobody had a huge house. I mean, they were all nice-sized homes, which now have almost all been demolished, and it's very, very different. I don't like to drive through. But we had a school bus. We went every morning. We went to school on a school bus, and I think there were 2. I think my sisters and brother, who all went to school in Lafayette. I think our bus came first, and then their bus came. I'm not quite sure anymore. I can't remember. It was a long time ago.
So the bus system, you mean there was an Acalanes bus, and then there was a Stanley
I think there was a Stanley, and then they built the grammar school at the end of Happy Valley Road before it was the freeway that it is now. And I think my brother went there. Nobody went to the one that's on the Casso property because they were all too old. They were all going to Cal by then. Or, yeah, mostly Cal, I think. Can't remember. I think Jane went someplace else. I don't know. Anyway.
Okay. About what year was it when you came to Lafayette?
46 and 47.
Okay.
Yeah. I drew a little map of the houses that... It was Upper Happy Valley, Lower Happy Valley, and Bear Creek Road. when I first came to Lafayette with my mom and dad when I was a little girl, what they called the Broadway low-level tunnel, the first Caldecott bore, wasn't there. They were building it. So I probably was 5 or 6, and we used to come through the old low-level tunnel, which is still there. It's an old wooden bore. It's up above the Caldecott. You can wind around down to the highway. And then they built the first Caldecott bore, and then the 2 bores, and then, of course, the current bore. And but this was just a 2-lane road all the way to Walnut Creek.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. It was... And you went through Lafayette, and you ended up on Main Street in Walnut Creek. And Mount Diablo Boulevard, I don't think it was even called Mount Diablo Boulevard. I don't know if it was called anything. But Lafayette, the things that are still there, largely the only building that is still there is the Roundup Room, which is still there.
The bar. Saloon, okay.
Yeah. But that was... When I remember my dad called it a biker bar because there were always motorcycles parked in front of the Roundup Room and in the parking lot, which is still there. And there were actually hitching posts in Lafayette. And then when I was in high school, I worked for the Sparling, so the pharmacy, Bill Sparling, and I worked in the soda fountain after school, and then I ushered at the Park Theater. My father said when I was 15, "You will get a job. You must learn to take care of it yourself." So I worked for almost everybody. I worked for the Lafayette Sun, for Herman Silverman. I worked for the men's store. I have the name written down, it was a very friendly little town. You knew everybody, except most of the guys that came into the pharmacy to the soda fountain were from St. Mary's.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Where was that pharmacy? Like,
it was on the corner. Well, I'll show you where it was. If we can see my scratching. Is this Happy Valley or is this? Oh yeah, this is Happy Valley. This is Upper Happy Valley, and Bear Creek Road. Happy Valley turned, and Bear Creek Road went up the hill. I think they call this Happy Valley Road now, but it isn't Happy Valley Road. It's old Bear Creek Road, and you could take that road all the way to Orinda, and then they built the reservoir, and you couldn't. You could go around the reservoir because I used to ride horseback through there, and it was beautiful. It was. So these are the houses that I remember, and then you ended up on Mount Diablo Boulevard, and the gas station was still there then. Yeah, and at the end of Happy Valley there was a supermarket. It wasn't a Lucky's or a Rayleigh's or a Hagstrom's or anything. It was just a supermarket, and the Connors built their house. Wilma and Joe Connor built their house. Ours was on Redwood Lane. Theirs was on Happy Valley next to the Scott's house, and then the Durham's house, the Scott's house, and the Connors house. And then there was nothing, just hills on that side of the road until you got to the junction of Bear Creek and Happy Valley. And somebody built a house in there. And then the Malleys sold their house on Happy Valley Road. And they built a house on the first part of Bear Creek on property they still own. They owned a lot of the hills at that time.
Those are the Malleys.
Yeah, yeah. I think Grandpa Malley came to Lafayette pretty early on because Mary Ann was telling me about and showed me some pictures of the land that they had owned at the time. And the jacuzzis built across from them. But almost all the names were people that you knew from the news or, because I think they came out here largely because their kids could go to a good school and things like that. And most of the kids I went to school with or my sisters and brother went to school with.
So these people were building around the same time your family was building as well, or this was after that?
Well, the Connors were building the same time we were building. The Durhams and the Scotts, the Connor coming down Happy Valley toward Lafayette was a hill. Then the Connors house, and they were building when we were building. And then the Scott's house, which had been built before, it's still there. I don't think that's been torn down yet. And then the Durham's house, and then Redwood Lane. And the Durham house was a beautifully built brick house. And so it was original. And then the McGuire house, which is on the other side, it's Redwood Lane. The Durham house was here, ours was here, and the McGuire house was right here. The McGuire's house was a big old white clapboard house. Mr. McGuire was a lawyer in San Francisco, and he used to wait in the morning. Every morning when we went down to get the bus, he was standing on Happy Valley Road waiting for his ride to San Francisco. And he lived in that house with his, I think it was a sister. I think it was a sister or a relative. Oh, it was a woman, and she took care of the house and took care of, and then across from us was a little rental house, which was right on the creek. And that was rented by Dave and Ann Penna when I was a kid. They were a young married couple. And then Mr. McGuire's sister lived next door in a little white house that they only just recently tore down, and her name was Miss Milliken. So I don't think the woman who lived at his house was his sister, because her name wasn't Milliken. Mm-hmm. And then he had a boarder whose name, what was his name? I can't remember his name right now, but he loved to catch gophers. His big deal was, I caught a goof this morning. What was his name? It's on my list. I'll look at it in a minute. But it was, it was just country. It was just comfortable country. I sometimes got to do one of the kids' paper routes on horseback on Sunday morning and stuff like that. And I could ride my horse down Happy Valley Road and down Mount Diablo Boulevard. There were a lot of horses. A lot of people had horses. And then we went to school with the Sulbergers, who owned Sulberger Florists in Oakland, and the Babcocks, Owen and Jack. Jack Babcock's still alive. I saw him at my sister's funeral. So his family owned a company called Babco Castings, and as my memory serves me, they made the cast iron covers for manholes. Oh, I don't know that that's entirely, but I do remember something about that's one of the things they did. I don't know what else they did.
I was just curious. So you said a lot of people had come to the area looking for a school for their kids. Is that what your parents were coming here for?
Yes, largely. We lived on Sequoia Road, which was, again, all during World War II. It was between the Oak Knoll Naval Hospital and the San Leandro Naval Hospital. And I went to Frick Junior High School in downtown Oakland and would have matriculated to Castlemont High School. And my father, in those days, the bad kids were mostly from Italian families who had immigrated to Oakland during World War II, and they were known as the Pachooks. They were, the big chain and the baggy pants and everything. And my father just didn't want us to go to school. He didn't particularly want my sister and I, who were then, Bethy's 2 years younger than I am, I would have gone from Frick to Castlemont, and my dad didn't think that was ideal. And so he was looking for property out this side of the tunnel, and because he knew the area because of my mother's business in Walnut Creek, and so he saw the piece of property in Happy Valley, and he just went and looked at it, and he told the real estate agent he was buying it, and if he hadn't said it that day, he wouldn't have gotten the land. So because it was a wonderful piece of property for a very reasonable price, because we could sell. We lived in a very nice house on Sequoia Road. It was a big Spanish style house. So I think it probably sold for at least half of what Happy Valley cost, or maybe more. I don't know. Those things I don't know. I just remember that my parents paid $1,700 for their first house on Marywood Drive in Montclair. $1,700. It was a little house. It was a cute little house. My dad rebuilt the whole thing, so it was a darling house. I went to see it about 5 years ago. It's a little house. And my sister and I were there, and then my sister Jane was in the oven when we moved to Happy. Oh, no, she was born maybe because I don't know. We were staying in Half Moon Bay. We had a house with friends on the ocean in Half Moon Bay. And we stayed there. I think Mother was pregnant with Gus. I don't know. Too long ago.
And so you said you had orchards and things. Was your father what did he do when he came to Lafayette? What was his profession?
He was a general manager for a company called Acalanes, and they built they called them portable service stations for the Army and the Navy. There were big trucks that had all kinds of stuff on them. But he had an idea, which my father always had. He had an idea that people were buying cars. This was after the war, so of course people were buying new cars, and they all had plush seats or nice upholstery. So my father designed and then decided to manufacture a slipcover, a plastic slipcover that you could see the seat through the plastic, but would protect the car's interior. And then he manufactured covers for mechanics to put on the car when they were working on the car, and they had foam on one side or something, rubber on one side, and then a heavy surfaced material on the other side, so that they wouldn't slip off the side of the car's fender, and they would keep the car clean. And so he went into business, and that's what he did.
Okay.
For as long as I can remember.
Okay.
So
And that business was run out of Oakland, or that was run?
It was run out of Lafayette. He actually had the manufacturing was done. I don't know. I think it was in like San Jose or someplace like that. Mm-hmm. And then he had a little warehouse where he packaged and shipped the materials. And then he was the salesman. He sold the things, and then he had them manufactured and packaged and shipped them all over the country.
And he just did that like out of your house, or he had an office?
No, he had his house. He had an office at home, mm-hmm. but he also had a warehouse facility. I think it was in Emeryville. Oh, okay. I don't even know. I don't know if I was ever even there. I just know that he went there, and that stuff disappeared from there. But my mother's shop was in Lafayette.
Okay. Where was her shop?
Down. Do you know where the nut house is?
Oh, the nut. It's like literally he makes like walnuts.
Yeah.
Near the library, I think.
Yeah, it's on the other side, across from the library. What was in that row of brick buildings?
Oh, okay.
And she had a secretary and another woman that worked with her, and she did a lot of famous name houses out here. And she also did a very interesting thing. Someone gave her name to the Santa Fe Railway. So she decorated railway cars for executives when they had their own rail cars. Mm-hmm. She did rail cars, and she also did quite a few. A baseball player who died of something, Lou Gehrig's disease. So it might have been, I don't know, but she did his house. And then she did, out on Ignacio Valley Boulevard, there were a lot of pretty wealthy farmers who had beautiful homes, and she did a lot of homes out there. I remember going with her, and her office was on Main Street in Walnut Creek, and she would take us sometimes during the summer to her office, and we would play in Walnut Creek. And that was when next to her office was a creamery. And the man that owned the creamery, whose name I cannot anymore remember, told us we could fry an egg on Walnut Creek's hot summer streets. And he actually came out and fried an egg for us one day. It did, the white did cook.
Wow.
And then that was when whipped cream was coming in canisters with some kind of gas in the canister, and one blew up in his face, and he lost an eye. And then so they closed that creamery, and then he opened in Lafayette. He opened another one just like it in Lafayette. I don't think it was ever very successful. Lafayette used to be where Safeway is now. Past the Safeway were a lot of houses. That was houses, little houses like the backside of Lafayette is still full of little houses. Then there were new car lots. The buildings are still there, and I don't even know what's in them anymore. And then his creamery, and I think it was just too far out of town to ever really be successful. Mm-hmm. I remember going there, probably across from Minuteman's too far up the street, but in that area where Minuteman is on the other side of the street, it was on the opposite side of the street. But I don't know, too far, too long ago.
Okay. So the car lots you said were behind what the Safeway is now, or
they were on Mount Diablo Boulevard.
Oh, okay.
The buildings are still there. Mm-hmm. No, maybe some of them aren't because they put those new apartment buildings in there.
Mm, yeah.
I sort of drive through Lafayette blindly.
Mm-hmm.
I'm usually going to Minuteman because I work for Minuteman. Okay. I'm a graphic artist, so I work for Minuteman. But the town had, of course, the library was down across from, or right across from the Presbyterian Church where I was married the first time. And then there was the firehouse, and then I think the library was in there somewhere. But there was a library. And then the new library is where the old Veterans Hall used to be. Okay. And that was where we went in high school on Saturday. Once a month on Saturday they had the Lafayette assemblies. And everybody at Acalanes, the parents all wanted you to go to the assemblies because that's where you learn to dance.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. And the boys stood on one side of the room, and the girls stood on the other side. And then you just had to cross over and dance with whoever was there. So the boys always tried to be strategically placed so they could get the girl they wanted. Mm-hmm. God, I'd forgotten the assemblies.
So you were saying you rode horses a lot. A lot of people had horses when you were
There were a
growing
lot
up?
of horses, yeah. The Malleys had, in fact, I met Jack Malley riding horseback in the moonlight. And Jack was a sort of forbidden territory because I think he was 2 or 3 years older than I was. And my father was not happy that I was dating him. But the Malleys were very nice. They were nice people. They were nice to me. Jack was very nice to me. I actually had my first alcoholic beverage with the Malleys at dinner in Lafayette. It was Cutty Sark, and I drank it the rest of my life. But they were nice people. They owned a parrot too, a big parrot that used to go, "Charlie want a cracker? Charlie want a cracker?" and say nasty words, and then Mrs. Malley would have to throw a cover over his cage.
I'm curious. Somebody else I interviewed talked about a horse show that came through Lafayette, or like a horse. It was like a monthly or thing like that. Do you remember anything like that?
No, I don't.
Okay.
In fact, I don't remember anything associated like that with horses, which is kind of unusual because I was really a horse crazy nut in those years.
Okay.
Yeah, I had been riding since I was about 12, so 11 or 12, and I rode at Mills College and stuff like that because my mother was also a horsewoman. She'd ridden all her life too. But I don't remember a horse show coming.
Okay.
No memory.
Okay. So with all the open land out there, was there a lot of people farming around you?
Yes. a lot of Portuguese families. One of my neighbors and kids I went to school with were the Brannon boys, the Mr. and Mrs. Brannon and their sons. Keith was one of them, and I can't remember all the rest of the names. And he was what he did for a living was to spray all the orchards, and they used to pull this big barrel thing around on a trailer and then spray the orchard. They all died fairly young too, because I don't think that spray was very good for them. But they didn't wear masks or anything, and they also had what was known as an English plow, which turned the earth without like a normal plow, just big furrows. Well, it sort of didn't do that. It sort of plowed the earth up, but it was flatter and more, and it turned everything on, all the weeds under, so they became fertilizer. But so the down Happy Valley Road, down Redwood Lane, and then you went down to Happy Valley, and it sort of straightened out. It was kind of downhill, not a lot, past the Lafayette School, past the Caso's land. On either side of the street were orchards. There were a few houses on the right-hand side, past where the school currently is. There were a few houses in there. But the left-hand side was almost all orchards. After we built, they built a few little houses down the road from Miss Milliken's. Then they opened up the hill past Miss Milliken's, across from the Lafayette School, and terraced that and put houses in there. There was nothing there, but where Happy Valley kind of straightened out, and on the right-hand side were the Romers and the Bedard's little houses, and that's where they again went up the hill and built a series of houses, big houses, fairly large houses, because one of the companies I worked for was CBS Plywood. And Jack Favors owned CBS Plywood. They built one of the houses up on that new development. But across the street would have been just orchards. I think this was a pear orchard. I think that those orchards, they were apples, pears, and maybe apricots. So they were sort of mixed. But the whole part of that, before the houses, was all orchards. Now there were no orchards on Happy Valley Road going the other direction, which would be going backward up past our house and then going up to Upper Happy Valley Road. And there were a few on that left-hand side, but on the right-hand side, where the Chikuzzi's house was, across from the Malley's original house, and down around the bend. I think down around the bend there may have been a few orchards on either side of Happy Valley. But and then along Happy Valley Road were walnut trees, all just walnut trees growing, not on Upper Happy Valley, but Lower Happy Valley, where it turned, all the way down, almost to where the road was that they built, that Jack Favors was on. Almost there were walnut trees on both sides of the road. We used to go gather the walnuts in the fall. We knew who was a farmer because all the kids whose families grew walnuts had brown hands during walnut husking season, because when you husk the walnut, you got brown hands. We could tell when we were at school who had walnuts and who didn't. They were free for the taking when I was a kid. I don't know who planted them or how long they'd been there. They were huge old trees, so they'd been there a while. But it was the Casos. Not only did they farm their land, but if you went up Redwood Lane, our house was here. Then there was a little road that wound around on the hill. And that belonged to the heir of the Singer's sewing machine fortune. so he didn't do anything. He had a wife and 4 or 5 kids, all who had red hair. And he used to go up there and build things. Ponds, little houses, sheds. And there was a shed on the side of the hill which was filled with cases of Cutty Sark. Which, I don't know how, they just sat up there. Everybody knew about them. But the Cassos farmed the land at the end of Redwood Lane, and now there are houses in there. But they farmed the land same way they farmed their own land. And I don't know whether they owned it or rented it or just used it. But because we could go up and pick anything. We could pick anything we wanted. We could harvest onions, or we could harvest zucchini, or could harvest tomatoes when they were in season. And that was perfectly all right. Even at Halloween, when the kids would have rotten tomato fights on Happy Valley Road. With Casso's rotten tomatoes. I remember one time they hit my father's car. That didn't make my father happy. I think it was his new Hudson too. Wow. Okay. He got a little angry. Country kids games.
So you could just go from, like, if you wanted let's say some pears or something, you just went into the orchard and grabbed some.
Yeah, yeah,
oh, okay.
Yeah. It was an acceptable thing to do. I was trying to remember some of the. I can't remember. Bacigalupi, I think, was one of the names. Lucas was, I know, there were a lot of Lucases, but they owned the grading. They made built all the roads out here too. But they lived in Orinda. It wasn't considered stealing because you didn't take that many. Mm-hmm. I mean, you didn't. You only took the ones you could reach anyway.
Okay. And so, growing up, what do you remember doing as kids? You said you rode horses.
Swam. We did a lot of swimming. Babysat. I babysat for the Connors kids, and then when I first got married, I had 2 kids, and I got all the baby stuff from the Connor children. So the Connor children are younger than I am. I think Thais is probably my age. Tara and Thais are probably 15 years younger than I am. What did we do? Worked in the yard, helped around the house. I helped my mom can things and make jam because we did all those we had apricot trees, and we had quince, apricot, apple, pear. What else? I know we had a couple of cherry trees, 2 Queen Anne cherry trees. What did we do? What did we do in the wintertime? I don't know. I always had a job. Okay. I worked Saturdays at the pharmacy. In the morning, I would go at 10, and then I'd walk home at 5, except in the winter when... So it was the Lafayette pharmacy. It was the Roundup room, then the street, then the Lafayette pharmacy. Behind the pharmacy were all little houses and a creek, and a lot of what we call the poor kids, like they had single mother. I know that then there was the Emporium, the Lafayette Pharmacy. Then there was Emporium. The woman who worked in the Emporium was a single mother because her husband had died in the war, and she worked in the Emporium and lived behind the Emporium in one of the little houses. And then there was the 5 and 10 cent store. And then there was, I don't remember, a couple of little stores. And then Moraga Road. And those stores got torn down for the husband and wife who allegedly filled their car with money and drove to California to build their savings and loan company. And I should remember the name because I did ads for them, but I can't remember their name. Because I owned an ad agency. Okay. Later. I mean, this is after.
That Emporium, so if the Roundup is on Mount Diablo Boulevard, the pharmacy and the Emporium were
On Mount
that?
No,
Or
on Mount.
on that?
Yeah.
Okay.
So it was the roundup room. Mm-hmm. Then the street. I don't know what street that is. That's not Brown Avenue. It's a cross street. On the other side, there was the roundup room. On the other side was a hotel, quote, only it wasn't really a hotel. Allegedly, it was a brothel. It was a 2-story white building. Downstairs was a restaurant, which is where I went with the Malleys for dinner. And they had a Maya bird that used to go every time I walked by. And I got mad one day and walked in. I was a teenager, and I walked in and I said, "How dare you?" And of course it was the bird. I was very embarrassed. And then up the street was the Lafayette Sun, which was owned by a man named Herman Silverman, who started the Sun. And I worked for Herm, too. When I was going to arts and crafts, I worked for Herman. He taught me a lot. Taught me a lot about type and ink and stuff. And then the roundup room was on the other side of Mount Diablo Boulevard. Then the road. Then the pharmacy. Then the Emporium, which had everything. Mm. And then the drugs. I mean the Five and Dime, which if the Emporium didn't have it, the Five and Dime did. Bought a lot of Christmas presents at the Five and Dime and the Emporium. And then the building that became the Savings and Loan. Can't remember the name of the Savings and Loan for the life of me. And then Lafayette Plaza was across from that, and the Park Theater, Millie's little restaurant, the first Millie's, then the bicycle store, and then something else, and then nothing on the corner. And that became Desani's Delicatessen. And the Desani's originally had been on on Mount Diablo Boulevard, up near the end of Happy Valley Road. And they had what was known as the Crab Shack. And it had a big crab pot. And in crab season, you could get 3 crabs for $1 out of that crab pot. And then they moved. And I went to school with the Desani's. You went to school with everybody,
okay.
You know. If they had kids your age, and most people seem to have kids my age. So what did we do? I don't know. We played jump rope sometimes, oddly enough.
Okay.
Learned to drive. Okay. We all learned to drive. My father taught me to drive until I hit the cherry tree. And then I was on my own. I think the first thing I ever drove was a tractor. Not my father's, but it was a tractor. Rode horseback a lot. Swam a lot. What else did we do?
Could you tell me a little bit about going to Acalanes when you went there?
Well, I think there were only 700 students the first year, and not many more after that. I think there weren't many more after, even when I graduated. And it was a very modern school because it had the outdoor buildings and the outdoor corridors. So you went through the outdoor corridor to each class. So you were outdoors in the winter and in the summer. And so the main office and everything was here. And then there was a big lawn. And then there was a driveway here, and the gym was over. Over here. The gym and the pool were over here. So it was pretty exciting because we had a swimming pool and we all took swimming, and we had wonderful dances that we decorated for. I remember one of them. I made a coach on a somebody had a sulky, which was a little horse-drawn carriage, and I turned it into a pumpkin for our dance, and some boys put it up on the roof of the gym after the dance. Nobody could ever figure out how they got it up there. But football was big. We played again, and basketball especially. We played against Pittsburgh. Had a lot of big black tall, good basketball players. So it was always a very exciting game to have Pittsburgh come and play us. And almost everybody went to Acalanes. I mean, there was no Camp Lindo. There was Diablo, which I think some Walnut Creek kids went to. Was it called Diablo? I think it was. I'm not sure. So all the Orinda kids, everybody, we all went to the same school. And I don't know, I was very big in the art department, because I was always, quote, an artist. So I was social something chairman one year because I was a designer. So we decorated the gym for all kinds of events. And my mom actually, they asked my mother to come and speak at Acalanes one time because she was an employed woman, which was unusual. And I was so impressed when my mother got up and started talking. I went, whoa, that's my mother? She had a master's degree in dietetics and a minor in interior design. So she always wanted to work. She always loved working. I don't think she was cut out to be a mother, although she was a very good mother. Mm-hmm. But I think she liked to work. So she worked. But there was a discrepancy or a disparity at Acalanes, something that I didn't like at all, which meant that farm kids always got kind of shoved to one side, and the Orinda kids, who were the rich kids, and the Lafayette kids, who were the second rich kids, and then the Walnut Creek kids, who were the farm kids. It always bothered me that they weren't included in all of the activities that the rich kids got to be included in. So I was always battling with the rich kids. I don't think I was terribly popular in some events. But it was a nice school. It was, and I think we had very good teachers. And one of our instructors, he taught me, I had biology with him. I think he was the first principal at Camp Lindo when they opened Camp Lindo. But sports were very big. Swimming was very big. I think they even introduced golf my senior year, and tennis. You could take tennis. I think Acalanes now has a new pool. I think it has either two pools or just one big new pool. I'm pretty sure I was there with another grandkid a couple of 3 years ago. The baseball team was very important. It was less organized than it is now. I mean, every kid didn't have a uniform with his name on it. You could wear a T-shirt and play baseball.
So there was no uniforms at all? You just wore whatever you wanted?
I think there were uniforms, but I don't think there wasn't the emphasis on uniforms that there is now. I know that kids didn't have uniforms with names on them because they could hand them down. And I know we didn't have any kind of swimming suits for uniforms because I remember my mother bought me a very expensive Jansen swimming suit, which was wool and it itched. And someone stole it from me. I remember that. I think I didn't care because it itched. But I know that I wore it. I can remember putting it on. So, I mean, I know I wore it during swim meets and stuff like that. So we didn't have the emphasis on... We did wear uniforms. We wore pleated navy blue skirts and white midi tops with ties. And we had Friday was free day. You could wear any clothes you wanted on Friday. But I think the last year in high school they eliminated the uniforms. But when I first started Acalanes, we all wore uniforms. And you had to wear white buck shoes with fuzzy socks.
What year did you graduate from Acalanes?
51, I think.
And then you went to college elsewhere?
I went to arts and crafts.
Okay.
Yeah. I rode the Greyhound bus to arts and crafts.
Okay. And
then I went to Berkeley.
You went to Berkeley, and you said you got married and had children, and then you came back to Lafayette after that?
I got married to a boy I met at arts and crafts. And I was going to Berkeley and arts and crafts at the same time. So I didn't graduate from arts and crafts. I met an older fellow whose name was Don Malone. I had one child, a daughter, and then we moved to 29 Palms in Southern California, in the Mojave Desert, because his family had homesteaded there, and so we moved into the homestead, he was a teacher. He taught here, and then we moved there after Katie was born, which was a fascinating part of my life, living in the desert. However, my husband had a wandering eye, and he wandered too far one time, and so I came back to Lafayette and divorced him, and then I remarried here. I went to work here, not in Lafayette, in Oakland. And I lived in Lafayette on Mount Diablo Boulevard behind, I call him Got Rocks Gordon, but it's not Got Rocks Gordon anymore. On the Lafayette Creek. It was a little cottage, and I lived there. And then I got married, and then I had another kid, 2 more kids. One of them's Mary Ailing. So
Okay.
She was the last experiment. So then we lived, let's see, where did we live? Several places. We lived in Oakland. And then, we lived in Oakland, and then I got divorced from that husband because he had an alcoholic problem. Oh, he was a brilliant, charming, lovely person. And then I moved to Orinda and lived in Orinda for a long time. And then I lived in the North Bay, in Santa Rosa, because my father had retired there, and I went to live near him so that I could, because he lived until he was 92. So I sort of took care of my dad. Oh, I didn't really take care of him. He took care of himself, but I was there. So. And then I moved to Walnut Creek and sold that house to move here. So I've sort of been circulating around here. Yeah. Never got too far away except the desert. That was a great adventure. So, yeah. Then I bought a bakery. So I've had several careers. I owned an ad agency, a bakery. That's enough. That was enough. Don't ever buy a bakery.
I'm not that good at bakers. Where was your ad agency?
In Berkeley.
Okay.
It was on Berkeley on Ashby. No, on 4th Street. It's on 4th Street. How long? I was there a long time. Raising my kids while running the bakery. I raised my children by telephone.
Okay. And the bakery was in Berkeley as well?
No, the bakery was on Bay Farm Island in Alameda.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. That was a wonderful experience too. Cost a lot of money, but but I had a good time, and I was a good baker. But don't ever hire bakers. They drink up all your booze that you use for flavoring things, and they take, as soon as they get their paycheck, they go to Las Vegas. They sell all your chocolate chips and walnuts and flour out of the back door to other guys. And the people who work for you steal from your till. Yeah. I don't know where you're going with your life, but I can tell you where not to go.
Yeah, I'll stay away from the baking.
Yeah, do that. Or the restaurant business. That's another biggie. But anyway.
So when you were did you do designs for local businesses in Lafayette, or did you?
No, all over the Bay Area. Yeah, no, I had lots of accounts. It was a very successful little business. It was never huge, but it was successful. I did a lot of startup companies. For some reason, I got a reputation for being good at logos and stuff like that. And I had off and on 2 or 3 employees, and I have a pretty nice portfolio. I'm amazed when I look at it that I went, I did that. I could do that. That's amazing. And I became a sign painter, so I still do sign painting on life rings for ships all over the country. I have an account on a company that for whom I work, and they send me orders, and I still hand paint signs. So my art has served my family well. Okay. It's a hard way to make a living.
You said you have 4 children, and do they live in Lafayette or in this area, or have they moved all over?
One of them lives in the Santa Cruz Mountains. My son lives in the Santa Cruz Mountains. My daughter Susie lives in Moraga. My daughter Mary and her husband and I live here. And my daughter Katie lives in Lafayette. So, yeah, they haven't strayed far, with the exception of my son, who strayed to Santa Cruz, more or less. Mostly more, not less, since he does live down there still. And all of my sister was the dean of admissions at Bolt Hall in Berkeley. She died 6 months ago. So she stayed in the area. My brother lives in Clovis because he's married into the Acalanes family, who were ranchers in Clovis. So his wife is Japanese, and just the most wonderful person on earth. He was very lucky. My sister Jane lives in the Santa Cruz Mountains, and she's a teacher. And my sister Margaret lives in the North Bay, and she's a vagrant. She does whatever she wants. So mostly my family stayed around here. Nobody's gone east, which is interesting because that's where my dad came from. He was from Connecticut. My mother was from Colorado. So, but they liked California and stayed.
So what do you think it is that kept your family here? Just the familiarity of Lafayette or this area?
I think it's a very comfortable place to live, largely. I think it is... it's changed dramatically in the last 10 or 12 years. Lafayette is not Lafayette as I know it at all. As Wilma Connor used to say, I don't know where our town went, but it sure did disappear. I think that it's California. It's a comfortable place to live. The weather is wonderful, largely. I wish it would rain. We wish it would rain a lot more. I think that it offered a myriad opportunities and good schools, good colleges, good close to the city, close to San Francisco. I mean, I think it's just a wonderful place to live. And I think that we are a family. We like being around one another. I don't know if that equates, but it's good reason.
Indeed.
But I think it's in general. It's just California's a lovely place to live. Still, in spite, but it better start raining pretty quick.
What do you think the biggest changes you've noticed in Lafayette from when you were younger and now?
The crowding, the people, the building, the tearing down. There's a company called Main Street Properties, which is buying up parts of Lafayette right and left. And I think that we have a new group of people who can provide, who are interested in tearing down old Lafayette and building it into something, a destination. I mean, every restaurant, my daughter and son-in-law are friends with a lot of the people who own, they own the Cooperage, and they own a couple of other restaurants in Lafayette. Their kids are the same age as the twins. And their idea is to get everybody in to come to Lafayette like Walnut Creek. It's a destinations town now, and unfortunately, you can't park in Lafayette anymore. You can't just walk down the street anymore. You certainly couldn't ride your horse down the street anymore, or any other number of things. I think that. It's bound to happen, but I feel in my lifetime it's something of a tragedy that it's just overwhelming what it was to become something that it wasn't, and too many people. But again, that's why we moved here. So we were too many people for the people who were here before, too, at some point in time. But that would be my greatest disappointment in what's happening to Lafayette. And they keep tearing down, which is happening all over the country and all over the world. They're tearing down all the lovely old things for new things. I don't know if you've noticed, but everything in my house is something old. The horse, the record cabinet, the waterless cooker. Round table isn't, but almost everything was something else before it was furniture for me.
Oh, okay.
And I regret that we have so little interest in preserving what was here. So what? My grandkids won't know unless they've been to Grammy's house, of course.
Well, that's the end of my question. If there's anything you wanted to show me on these, or
well, I was gonna. I don't know if this would interest you, but it's my mother's and my father's. My mother was Doris. My father was Broughton, and I have the name of the Happy Valley neighbors that were our immediate neighbors, and. Then, when I was thinking about this, I was thinking of May Lures, who lived across the street from Wilma and Joe on the property next to the Connors property. Next to the Casos property, was an executive at H.C. Capwell's. Joe Connor, and his wife Wilma was my best friend. Even though Wilma is 10 or 12 years, she died last year, but she's about 12 years older than I was. But we remained friends forever. I went to her house and visited her constantly. Joe owned an advertising agency. Lee and Gene Scott, which lived next door, he was in manufacturing. He manufactured tchotchkes for like coffee cups with people's names on them and pens and stuff like that. Jerry Durham, who was the property in front of ours, he owned a laundry. He committed suicide in his garage, in his car. I think no one ever really knew, but I think he found out he had cancer or something. And then his wife Claudia married one of his employees, whose name was Joe Freitas, and they continued to live in that house. Dave and Ann Penna lived across from us in Happy Valley, in our house in the little rental that was owned by Mr. McGuire. And then the Freemans, who lived up behind the Caso property, he was president of Bell and Howell, which made cameras. The Casos were farmers. The Bridges, who lived on the property at the turn of Happy Valley Road in the big house back in the hill, which they just tore down, he was a lawyer. Mr. McGuire, who lived next to us, was a lawyer. Colonel Garrett, whose building was where the Postino restaurant is in Lafayette, was a lawyer, but he was also a drunk. And the joke was, you never wanted to ride with Bill Garrett up Happy Valley Road because he would stop to pick you up, like when I was walking home from the drugstore. But then he couldn't drive anymore, so he walked up Happy Valley Road. And he was an attorney. The Babcocks owned Babco Castings. The Sulbergers owned Sulberger Florists in Oakland. Bedard and Romer were both renters. The Brannons, Mr. Brannon was the man who did the pest control. The Malleys were contractors and built houses everywhere. Oh, and in the Park Theater, I worked there. I worked at the drugstore. I worked at the Sun. I worked for Jim Sherry's men's store. The Roundup Room. and the pharmacy had hitching posts. Lafayette Square, where Lafayette Square is now, is just small houses and a creek. And I was married in the Lafayette Presbyterian Church. Okay. So I don't know if you want this or not.
Oh, yeah, we'll take those. Thank you.
Yeah, you can have any of these if you can. If they're you can figure out what the chicken scratches mean.
So where was the Presbyterian Church?
It's right across from the firehouse, which is called now is the Firehouse School on Moraga. Mm-hmm. And then the Stanley School's over here, and the church is right in there. It's sort of tucked in on the other side of the street. Okay. And I think they have a church school there, too. The firehouse, which is the firehouse school, was the firehouse. We had our own fire engine. Mm-hmm. And on the 4th of July, it used to come out. But you can have any of these, and if they're of any interest to you, you're welcome to them.
And that's it for me. Thank you so much for doing this. And this interview ends at 12:37.